The research area known as social cognition emerged in the 1970s with the goal of answering this question. What are the specific mental processes through which we construct a meaningful understanding of our social world? In this lecture, we will review the ways that people make sense of this world, the core elements of social cognition. But first, cognition is a term referring to the mental processes involving and gaining knowledge and comprehension. Some of the many different cognitive processes include thinking, knowing, remembering, judging, and problem solving. Social cognition is the way an individual understands their social world. And the social cognition perspective is a view that focuses on how people perceive, remember, and interpret events and individuals, including themselves in their social world. Now, social cognition is governed by two systems of thinking, cognitive and experiential. The cognitive system is a conscious, rational, and controlled way of thinking. The experiential system is an unconscious, intuitive, and automatic way of thinking. As we humans evolved, we develop neocortical structures in the brain that allow for high-level thought processes, unconsciousness, self-awareness, language, logic, and rationality. Yet, we also have older brain structures, such as the limbic system, that we share with birds and reptiles. The result of having a hybrid brain is that social cognition is governed by two systems of thinking, a rational and controlled way of thinking, which is the cognitive system, and an unconscious, intuitive, and automatic way of thinking, which is the experiential system. Depending on the individual and the circumstances, a person's thoughts and action can be produced primarily by one system or the other. Now, the ideas discussed so far that thinking is governed by two systems of thought lie behind several theories you'll encounter in my lectures. These theories are often referred to as dual process. So, dual process theories are theories that are used to explain a wide range of phenomena by presenting two ways of processing information. Now, the two systems have different ways of organizing information. The cognitive system uses a system that rules to fit its ideas into logical patterns. It can think critically, plan behavior, and make deliberate decisions. The experimental system is guided by automatic or implicit associations among stimuli, concepts, and behaviors that have been learned from experience. Now, knowledge is stored in mental structures called schemas. It is a mental structure stored in the memory. It contains prior knowledge and associations with a concept. And scripts are schemas about an event that specify the typical sequence of actions that take place. Schemas that represent knowledge about other people are called impressions. We also have a schema about ourselves, our self-concept. Now, schemas come from many sources to include direct contact with other people, events, ideas, and from concepts on the basis of that personal experience. A lot of our general knowledge comes during childhood from the culture in which we were raised. Priman is the awakening or activating of certain associations. It is the process by which exposure to a stimulus in the environment increases the salience of a schema. When a schema is highly accessible, the salience of that schema is increased. It is activated in the person's mental system, even if they are not consciously aware of it, and it tends to color their perceptions and their behaviors. Embodied cognition is the mutual influence of bodily sensations on cognitive preferences and social judgments. How a social cognition is embodied. The brain systems that process our bodily sensations communicate with the brain systems responsible for our social thinking. Now, when it comes to intuitive judgments, just remember, intuitive judgment is a decision reached on the basis of subjective feelings. So not objective research, but rather our objective feelings. And the powers of that intuition is that our thinking is both partly automatic, which is impulsive, effortless, and without our awareness, and partly controlled, which is reflective, deliberate, and conscious. So, to put it in a different way, the mind typically classifies a stimulus into a category and then assesses a schema, a mental structure containing knowledge about a category. Schemas allow people to go beyond the information given and to make inferences, judgments, and decisions about a given stimulus. Although generally helpful, schemas can produce false beliefs and limit a person's interpretation of reality. Now, moving on to mood and social judgment. In addition to psychological motives, moods can play an important role in shaping social judgment about a given event or person. A mood is a generalized state of affect that persists longer than the experience of an emotion. For example, the happiness a person experiences after finding a dollar bill on the ground lasts a couple minutes, but moods can continue to resonate for much longer. And although emotions usually have a clear cause, sometimes we find ourselves in a bad or good mood, and we cannot quite put our finger on it. Why might humans have evolved the ability to experience moods in the first place? For one thing, moods may inform the person about the status of things in the immediate environment. Think about this for the evolutionary perspective. Being in a positive mood is a signal that everything is okay and there are no immediate threats to be considered. Negative moods, on the other hand, signal that something is wrong. As a result of these evolutionary pressures, people today may be oriented to use their moods as information in their judgments. Whether they realize it or not, they are listening to their moods when making decisions and forming judgments. By this logic, mood states should affect both the content of a person's social judgments and how motivated the person is to engage in effortful processing of information. So, Social judgment involves efficient information processes. It also involves our feelings. Our moods infuse our judgments. Unhappy people, especially the bereaved or depressed, tend to be more self-focused and brooding. Happy people, by contrast, are more trusting, more loving, more responsive. Mood pervade our thinking. When we are in a happy mood, the world seems friendlier, decisions are easier, and good news more readily comes to mind. Gloomy thoughts and bad mood primes our recollection of negative events. Our relationships seem sour. Our self-image and hopes for the future appear dim, and other people's behaviors more sinister. Just remember, motivation plays a role in shaping which schemas are activated, as well as when and how those schemas affect our behaviors and our judgments. In my next lecture, we will review perceiving and interpreting events. How do we perceive our social worlds? Understand how our assumptions and judgment guide our perceptions, interpretations, and recall.